Garrison's voice was too loud for the small executive kitchen, but he wanted everyone near the coffee machine to hear him. "Innovation comes from the youth, Clint," he said, clapping a heavy hand onto my shoulder. It was the same performative tone he used at the Thanksgiving table when he told the family how he built Barlow Logistics from a single truck, conveniently forgetting the 80-hour weeks I put in to save his largest freight lanes. "I am Clint Mercer, 50 years old, and for the last 6 years I have been the senior operations director at Barlow Logistics. More accurately, I am the son-in-law," which in Garrison's empire meant I was the guy who cleaned up the mess while he took the golf trips. "My wife Victoria always told me to be patient with her dad. He's old school, Clint," she would say over dinner. "He just wants to make sure the family legacy is secure. But legacy doesn't negotiate vendor exclusivity or fix a broken routing database at 2 a.m. I did. I rebuilt our entire distribution grid, turned a chaotic department running on spreadsheets into a streamlined machine with 22% growth year over year. Nobody clapped. Hell, I think half the office still treated me like a glorified assistant who married into the boss's family. So when Garrison walked into the office on a Tuesday morning with a kid who looked like he just got his driver's license, I knew the wind was shifting. "This is Hunter," Garrison announced, beaming like a proud grandfather. "Hunter is Grant's son. You remember Grant from the country club, Clint? Hunter just finished his marketing degree. He is going to be interning with us, learning the ropes." Hunter stood there in a blazer that still had the factory folds, holding a leather notebook like it was a shield. His teeth were too white, his handshake too firm, and he wore dress shoes that looked like they had never touched actual asphalt. I gave him a polite nod. "Welcome aboard," I said. "We have a lot of data pipelines to run through." Garrison waved his hand dismissively. "Don't drown the boy in spreadsheets on day one, Clint. Let him get a feel for the culture." Hunter smiled, looking around the open office. "Yeah, I want to see the big picture stuff. I'm really interested in strategic growth." I went back to my desk. I had 48 emails from Vanguard Logistics regarding our exclusive freight lanes and a draft proposal for Atlas Industries, our largest client. Atlas made up 18% of our annual revenue. I had spent 7 months negotiating a customized routing integration that would lock them into a 3-year contract renewal. It was my baby. I wrote the code, mapped the regional distribution nodes, and secured the logistics waivers that saved them $140,000 in monthly overhead. Garrison's only contribution was taking the Atlas executives out to steak dinners and signing the final page. Within 3 days, Hunter was moved from the generic intern desk to a window office 2 doors down from mine. He had dual monitors, a brand new ergonomic chair, and a standing desk. I was still working off the same cracked laptop I had used since I started. Hunter spent his mornings wandering around the department with a coffee cup, asking my coordinators questions like, "What's the synergy here?" Or "How do we scale this narrative?" On Friday afternoon, he walked into my office. "Hey, Clint," he said, leaning against the door frame. "Garrison said I should look at the Project Elevate docs, the Atlas rollout. Do you have the login for the Vanguard API?" I looked up from my screen. "Onboarding takes 2 weeks, Hunter. Have you read the Vanguard exclusivity clauses yet? Especially Section 7 on regional operational liaisons. It's complicated." Hunter waved his hand, echoing Garrison's gesture perfectly. "Oh, I'll figure it out. I'm pretty quick with tech. Just send me the raw files." I didn't argue. I sent him the link to the public training manual and nothing else. The next week, the rumors started. It began with whispers by the water cooler and a misdirected calendar invite from the CFO's admin. There was a big announcement coming. Everyone in my department was excited. They kept slapping my back and saying, "Clint, this is it. Garrison is finally putting you in the driver's seat. You built this entire Atlas system from scratch." I tried to stay grounded, but that tiny candle of hope in the back of my mind flickered to life anyway. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe Garrison did recognize the work. On Thursday, the bagels arrived. That was my first clue that something was wrong. In our office, bagels meant bad news. The last time Garrison ordered catering, he outsourced the entire customer service department to a call center in another state, and the staff found out when they walked in and saw cream cheese spreads. We all filed into the main conference room. I sat in my usual spot, halfway down the table on the left. Garrison walked in last, wearing his best suit, followed by Hunter. Hunter was carrying a laptop and looking nervous but excited, like a kid about to open a Christmas present. Garrison cleared his throat, leaning his hands on the table. "Team," he began, his voice booming with that false warmth he used for public relations. "As you know, we are on the verge of launching Project Elevate, our new integrated routing system for Atlas Industries. This project represents the future of Barlow Logistics." He paused, looking around the room. "We need fresh eyes to guide this future. We need the energy of the next generation. That is why I am thrilled to announce that Hunter will be leading Project Elevate as our strategic director of operations." The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. My team looked at me, their faces blank with shock. The lead developer started to cough, then stopped. Garrison smiled, completely oblivious, or pretending to be. Hunter stood up, smoothing his blazer. "Thanks, Garrison. I'm really excited to quarterback this transition. We're going to disrupt the market." I stared at the Comic Sans font on the presentation slide. I didn't say a word. I just raised my hands and clapped. 3 slow, polite claps. The rest of the room followed, hesitantly, like they were applauding at a funeral. Garrison didn't look at me once during the entire meeting. My name wasn't on a single slide. The 6 months of code, the database architecture, the supplier agreements I had signed my name to. All of it was presented as a blank canvas that Hunter was going to paint. After the meeting, I went back to my office, closed the door, and took out a clean sheet of paper. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just looked at the calendar. My exclusive Vanguard liaison clause had a 30-day notice requirement, and the Atlas pilot was scheduled to launch in exactly 14 days. I smiled. It was the first real smile I had worn in months. Garrison's office always smelled like overpriced mahogany polish and bad executive decisions. On his desk sat a gold-plated golf trophy and a framed photo of him shaking hands with some state senator who got indicted 2 years later. When I knocked and walked in without waiting for his invite, he was on the phone, waving a finger to tell me to wait. "Yeah, Grant," he was saying, laughing into the receiver. "Hunter is going to quarterback the whole Atlas rollout. We're putting fresh blood in the driver's seat. Clint's going to support him." "Yep, talk soon." He hung up the phone and looked at me, his face shifting into a performative mask of paternal warmth. "Clint, buddy, big day, right? I hope you're ready to show Hunter the ropes on the Vanguard integration. We need to make sure the kid has everything he needs to look good for the board." I didn't answer. I just walked up to his mahogany desk and laid a crisp, white envelope directly on top of the Atlas status report he was ignoring. "What's this?" Garrison asked, his eyebrows knitting together. "My resignation," I said. "Effective 2 weeks from today." Garrison stared at the envelope. For a second he didn't move. Then he slowly reached out, opened the flap, and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. It contained exactly 1 sentence. "I, Clint Mercer, resign from my position as Senior Operations Director, effective July 28. He looked up, his jaw slightly slack. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke, Garrison," I said. "I will spend the next 14 days wrapping up my files and ensuring a clean handoff." He leaned back in his leather chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "Come on, Clint. Let's be adults here. Is this about the Atlas project? You're taking this personally." "It is professional, Garrison," I replied. "You decided Hunter was the right fit to lead the project. I'm deciding Barlow Logistics is no longer the right fit for my career. You can't just walk out." Garrison's voice rose, losing its polished edge. "We're 2 weeks away from the pilot launch. You built the routing system. Hunter needs your support, your family, for God's sake. Victoria's father is the CEO. Think about how this looks." I thought about how it looked when he announced a 23-year-old marketing graduate was leading my 7-month project. I didn't say that, though. I just smiled. "You made your decision, Garrison. I've made mine. I'll make sure the database is updated." I turned and walked out before he could start shouting. As soon as I got back to my desk, I opened my phone and sent an email to the legal department at Vanguard Logistics. I copied Diana, their director of operations. The subject line was Contractual Liaison Update, Barlow Logistics. The body was brief. Per Section 7.2 of our freight agreement, this email serves as official notice that Clint Mercer will be leaving Barlow Logistics effective 14 days from today. Section 7. 2 was a tiny clause I had negotiated into the contract when Vanguard tried to raise their shipping rates by 15% last year. I had agreed to the rate increase only on the condition that Vanguard would assign a dedicated operations liaison, me, and that any transfer of the liaison role required a 30-day written notice and mutual approval. Vanguard's legal team had agreed because they trusted my coordination. Garrison hadn't even read the clause. He just saw that the rates were settled and signed the contract during a lunch break. I spent the next 2 weeks cleaning out my office. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tell my team the details. I just archived my emails, cleaned up my personal files, and organized my handoff notes. I left the folders for the Atlas project exactly where they were supposed to be, but I removed my personal login credentials from the automated script that retrieved the Vanguard pricing APIs. Without my security token, the scripts would return a restricted access error. By my final Friday, the office was quiet. Garrison hadn't spoken to me since the resignation. Hunter had spent the last 2 weeks in meetings with the marketing team, designing a new logo for Project Elevate and drafting a press release. He hadn't asked me a single question about the routing architecture. At 5 p.m., I packed my notebook and my coffee mug into a cardboard box. I walked out of the building without a farewell email or a card. That evening, Victoria was waiting for me at the kitchen table. She had ordered takeout from our favorite place, but she hadn't touched her food. "So, you really did it," she said, looking at me with a mix of worry and curiosity. I set the box on the floor and sat down. "I did," she sighed. "My dad called me 3 times today. He's furious, Clint. He says you're ruining the family business because of your ego." "Do you think it is my ego, Victoria?" I asked. She looked at my hands, rough from years of late-night warehouse audits, then at my tired eyes. "No," she said quietly. "I know how hard you worked. I just hope you know what you're doing." I smiled, opening the container of noodles. "I know exactly what I'm doing." On Monday morning, I didn't set an alarm. I woke up at 8 a.m., made a cup of black tea, and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was register a new limited liability company, Mercer Operations Group. I spent $500 on the filing fees and bought a domain name. By 10 a.m., my phone started buzzing. It was a Slack screenshot from one of my former routing coordinators. "Hey Clint, sorry to bother you, but Hunter is trying to run the Vanguard API script, and it is throwing a 403 forbidden error. Do you know where the backup token is?" I didn't reply. I was no longer an employee of Barlow Logistics. By 1 p.m., the panic had spread to the executive suite. Hunter had apparently called Vanguard Logistics directly. According to my contact inside, Hunter had demanded that Vanguard unlock the API immediately, claiming he was the new strategic director. Vanguard's representative had politely informed him that per Section 7.2 of their contract, Clint Mercer was the only authorized liaison, and any change in operational leadership required a 30-day notice that had only been submitted 10 days prior. Until that notice period expired and Vanguard Legal approved the new liaison, all automated data exchanges were suspended. This meant the Atlas pilot, scheduled to launch in 4 days, had no live freight data. The routing system was blind. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Barlow Logistics. I let it ring. It rang again 10 minutes later. I put the phone on silent and went for a walk in the park. For the first time in 6 years, the sun was shining, and I wasn't thinking about a late shipment. By the second week of my departure, the cracks in the dam were widening into a flood. My former coordinator, who was still trying to survive under Hunter's strategic direction, kept me updated through text messages. It wasn't just Vanguard Logistics that had ground to a halt. Nexus Dynamics, our primary tracking hardware vendor, had flagged our account. When I negotiated the Nexus agreement, I had secured a timeline penalty waiver. It was a sweet deal that saved Barlow Logistics up to $8,000 per delayed delivery. But I had written that waiver with a specific clause. The waiver was active only while the implementation was personally managed by Clint Mercer. Without my signature on the weekly tracking audits, Nexus immediately suspended the waiver and retroactively billed Barlow Logistics for 3 delayed shipments from the previous month. That was $24,000 in unexpected fees in a single week. Hunter's solution to the billing discrepancy was to ignore the invoices. He scheduled a 2-hour brainstorming session with the marketing team to rebrand our client portal, calling it the Gateway to Efficiency. Meanwhile, the actual gateway was locked and the trucks were sitting idle. On Tuesday afternoon, my phone lit up with Garrison's name. I was sitting in a quiet, sunlit co-working space downtown, drinking hot tea. I had rented the suite the day before, using a security deposit paid by a small logistics startup that had hired me to review their routing schemas. I let the phone ring until it stopped. 20 minutes later, it rang again. Same caller. I ignored it. By the fourth attempt, I decided it was time to answer. Clint, Garrison's voice came through, loud and dripping with false camaraderie. "How are you, buddy? How's the time off treating you?" I took a slow sip of tea. "I'm doing well, Garrison. Good, good. Listen, we've had a couple of minor hiccups with the Atlas launch. Just some technical snags with the data exchange. You know how these IT systems can be. I was thinking we could bring you in for a few days, just to help Hunter clear up these bottlenecks. For the good of the company, of course." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the city skyline. "I don't work for Barlow Logistics anymore, Garrison. I am consulting full-time now through Mercer Operations Group." Garrison's voice stiffened. "Right, well, we can hire your group. Just a short-term contract, say 10 hours a week to answer Hunter's questions and jump on the supplier calls. What kind of hourly rate are we talking about?" I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop. I had already calculated the numbers. "I'll send you a formal proposal, Garrison," I said. "But to give you a heads up, my standard contract requires a monthly retainer, a 90-day minimum commitment, and my fee is $180 per hour. That is triple your old salary," Garrison barked, his polite veneer vanishing. "You're trying to gouge your own family, Clint," I smiled. "My old salary was for an employee, Garrison. This is for an expert who owns the routing logic. I will email the contract. Let me know if the board approves." I hung up before he could respond. The next day, my contact inside the company sent me a copy of a voicemail Hunter had left for a vendor. The kid sounded like he was on the verge of tears, stammering about database credentials and asking if they could bypass the security protocols just for 1 week. The vendor had refused, citing federal data security regulations. At Barlow Logistics, the blame game had reached a fever pitch. According to my inside sources, Hunter was telling everyone the routing software I built was outdated and buggy. Garrison was screaming at the IT staff, demanding they crack my personal security token. The IT director, a guy who had worked with me for 4 years, told Garrison that my code was encrypted, and trying to force it open would trigger a system lockdown that would paralyze the entire network. Meanwhile, Atlas Industries was noticing the delays. The pilot launch was supposed to happen on Friday, but they hadn't received their testing credentials or their shipping schedules. Their operations lead had sent a sharply worded email to Garrison, demanding to know why the system integration was offline. Hunter's reply had been a 5-page PowerPoint deck outlining the long-term vision of Barlow Logistics. The Atlas lead had not replied. I spent my Thursday afternoon preparing 3 proposals for new clients who had reached out to me through LinkedIn. They were mid-sized transport firms that had heard about the database I built for Barlow. Word travels fast in the logistics industry. People don't care about family names or country club golf scores. They care about whether their trucks arrive on time and their costs stay low. On Friday morning, I received a wire notification on my phone. Garrison had accepted my consulting proposal. The transfer was for the first month's retainer, paid in advance. A few minutes later, an email arrived from Garrison's personal account. It contained no text, just the signed contract attached. I printed the confirmation out and taped it to the wall of my co-working space. I labeled it, "My Favorite Apology." But my consulting agreement was only the first phase. Garrison thought he had bought my compliance and my silence. What he didn't realize was that I had only agreed to answer questions and provide data handoffs. I hadn't agreed to give them my intellectual property, and the real trap was about to spring. The corporate ballroom at the Hilton was quiet, but the air felt heavy. It was the annual logistics gala, the kind of event where companies paid $10.00 for a table to show off their trophies and exchange business cards. I was there as a guest of Dovetail Technologies, a firm that had hired me to optimize their shipping lanes. I was standing near the buffet, chatting with their lead architect, when I felt a pair of eyes on me. I turned and saw Garrison. He was standing near the bar, holding a half-empty glass of scotch. He looked older than 68 today. His suit was slightly loose, and his hair, usually styled back with expensive pomade, looked flat. He stared at me, his mouth pressed into a thin line. He didn't come over. He couldn't. He knew what was happening. The previous Tuesday, the board of Barlow Logistics had called an emergency session. A leaked copy of the meeting notes had reached my inbox via my old assistant, who had worked from home and used a screen recorder. According to the transcript, the meeting had started with Garrison trying to reassure the directors. "We have hit a few minor potholes with the Atlas rollout," he had said. "But Hunter has the vision. We are restructuring the workflows to align with modern synergies." Then, the lead strategist from Atlas Industries, who was dialing in from their corporate headquarters, had cut Garrison off. "With all due respect, Garrison, your new team couldn't find a project timeline if you nailed it to their foreheads. The pilot is supposed to be live, and our dashboard is blank. We are terminating our contract with Barlow Logistics effective at the end of the month," Garrison had stammered, trying to explain the Vanguard data lock. "We are bringing Clint back on a consulting retainer to resolve the technical integration. It will be sorted in 48 hours. The Atlas strategist hadn't hesitated. "Don't bother. We have already signed a direct services contract with Clint's new firm, Mercer Operations Group. If Barlow Logistics wants to handle our freight deliveries, your staff will coordinate through Clint. He has the exclusive rights to the routing dashboard." The silence in the boardroom had lasted for a full 10 seconds. "What do you mean he has the rights?" Garrison had demanded, his voice cracking. "He was our employee. The code belongs to the company." At that point, Barlow's chief legal counsel, a woman who had spent 15 years keeping the company out of court, had cleared her throat and slid a red folder across the table. "Actually, Garrison," she had said, her tone flat. "We have a problem." She opened the file and pointed to the exit agreement Garrison had signed 2 weeks prior. Section D, Clause 4B. I had drafted that separation agreement myself, using a boilerplate document from a legal website. But I had made one modification. I had inserted a clause stating that all custom software frameworks and database architectures authored by Clint Mercer that were not explicitly claimed as company intellectual property in a registered patent or copyright filing, prior to July 1, would remain the sole property of the author. Garrison had been so eager to sign my exit papers and get me out of the building so Hunter could take credit that he hadn't sent the document to legal. He had just signed it in his office, stamped it, and sent it to HR. Legal had explained the implications to the board. The route optimization algorithm Clint built is a custom framework. The company never filed a patent. By signing this agreement, you conceded the copyright to Clint. He owns the operating spine of Project Elevate. We cannot legally run the Atlas pilot without his software license. The CFO had dropped his pen. The operations VP had muttered, "Jesus Christ." Garrison had gone pale, sweat beads gathering at the back of his neck. "This is ridiculous. He's my son-in-law. It was a family company. Surely we have a right of use." "No," legal had replied, "we do not. And since you also failed to initiate a standard security revocation on his system credentials, he had full access to our databases for 10 days after his departure." "Did he steal the data?" one of the board members had asked, his voice rising in panic. "No," legal said, shaking her head. "He logged in once, deactivated his own developer credentials, and sent a confirmation log to HR. He did your job for you, Garrison. He protected us from data leakage liability, while keeping his own code." In the corner of the boardroom, Hunter had sat in silence. He hadn't said a word during the entire meeting. Slowly, he had closed his laptop, put his leather notebook into his backpack, stood up, and walked out of the room. Nobody had stopped him. He didn't return to his office. By 5 p.m., he had deleted Barlow Logistics from his LinkedIn profile and replaced it with "exploring new opportunities." Garrison had looked around the table, his eyes darting from one director to another. "What do you want me to do?" he had whispered. The board chair, a senior investor who owned 30% of the company's shares, had leaned forward. "We want you to negotiate, Garrison, and we want you to do it before Atlas files a breach of contract lawsuit." I took a sip of my drink, looking back at Garrison at the bar. He slowly turned away, leaving his scotch on the counter, and walked out the exit doors. I didn't follow him. I had a meeting in 10 minutes with Dovetail's VP to discuss a $120,000 integration contract. My company was only 2 weeks old, and we were already profitable. The final negotiation didn't take place in Garrison's office. It happened in the main boardroom of Barlow Logistics, with a court reporter present and 3 board members sitting on my side of the table. Garrison sat at the far end, looking like a spectator at his own trial. His lawyers had tried to find a loophole in Section D, Clause 4B of the exit agreement for 3 days. They found nothing. The contract was solid, signed by the CEO, and stamped by the notary. Under federal intellectual property law, the routing software code belonged to Mercer Operations Group. "Here are our terms," I said, sliding the fresh contract across the glass table. Garrison didn't even look at the paper. "How much?" he asked, his voice low and raspy. "A flat licensing fee of $15,000 per month for the use of the routing software," I said. "Plus a monthly consulting retainer of $12, zero for my firm to manage the API endpoints, and a seat on the advisory board to oversee all future contract migrations." Garrison's jaw tightened. "That's nearly $320,000 a year, Clint. You're bleeding us." "No, Garrison," I replied. "I am charging you the market value of the system that keeps your largest client from suing you. If you don't sign, Atlas terminates their freight contract tomorrow, and Dovetail Technologies will buy out your remaining regional warehouses for pennies on the dollar." "I know the warehouse margins because I optimized them." The lead board member leaned over to Garrison. "Sign it, Garrison," he whispered. "We don't have a choice." Garrison reached for his pen. His hand shook slightly as he pressed the black ink into the signature line. He signed, stamped it, and pushed the folder back to me. I checked the signature, closed the folder, and slipped it into my briefcase. "Thank you, gentlemen," I said, standing up. "I'll have the Vanguard API tokens reactivated by 5 p.m. today." As I walked out of the room, Garrison called after me. "Clint." I paused at the door, turning back. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "I built this company from nothing. I thought family was supposed to support family." I looked at him, remembering the 3 years of 80-hour weeks, the missed anniversary dinners, and the way he had introduced a golf buddy's son as the future of the company while I sat in the corner. "Family is supposed to respect family, Garrison," I said. "You wanted a business partner, so I became one." I walked out the double doors, down the elevator, and into the afternoon sun. That evening, Victoria and I sat on our porch. She was scrolling through her phone, and I was reading a client onboarding document for a shipping company based in Chicago. "My dad called me," she said quietly, setting her phone down. "He said you saved the Atlas account." I took a sip of my drink. "I did. Are you guys going to be okay?" she asked. "Professionally?" "Yes." "Personally?" "We'll see," I said. "But I'm no longer working for his approval, Victoria. And that is worth every penny of the licensing fee." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Good." The next morning, I arrived at my co-working space. I had 2 new emails from former Barlow Logistics clients asking for service terms, and a LinkedIn notification showing that Barlow's chief competitor had just viewed my profile. Garrison always thought clients were loyal to the company logo on the letterhead. He believed the name Barlow was what kept the trucks moving. But the clients didn't care about the name. They cared about the database that kept their shipments from getting lost in Ohio. They cared about the operations director who answered their emails at 2 a.m. and knew how to navigate a vendor strike. He built his company like a family heirloom, assuming it would shine just because he owned it. I built mine with contracts, leverage, and a long memory. And now, the guy who used to sit in the corner office without a nameplate had become the most essential name in the building. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the Coffee Pot Strikes.